Welcome back. If we can grab our seats, we'll get started again, please. Seems that it keeps falling to me to remind everybody that you should turn off your cell phones, please, because I know most of you have been using them during the break, or at least put them on silent, okay? So let's talk diabetes this afternoon. We've got some really exciting and really interesting things here to go over. But first, let me remind you what we're talking about. We're talking about a disease that affects 35 million people around the world living with type 1 diabetes. Over 30,000 Americans get diagnosed each year, half of whom are children. The physical, emotional, and financial toll on patients and families is, of course, incalculable, and the disease costs the U.S. alone over $14 billion in health care every year. Let me show you one man who actually has managed to live with and in some ways conquer, although I guess you don't really conquer type 1 diabetes, but who has managed to live with and really succeed with type 1 diabetes. In 1999, renowned U.S. swimmer Gary Hall Jr. was training for the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney. He had already swum very successfully, as you'll see, in the 1996 Atlanta Games. Gary then was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. He was told, your swimming career is over. No one has ever trained 8 hours a day and managed their blood sugar and their insulin levels, their caloric intakes, and so forth. But that's not Gary Hall Jr., as you'll see in this video.
In the 68 and 72 Olympics, Gary Jr. went on to win 10 Olympic medals, 5 of them gold, over 3 separate Olympic Games. But these stunning athletic feats almost never happened. About 2.5 years after the Atlanta Games in '96, where he won 4 medals, Gary was deep in training for the Sydney Olympics when things started to go wrong.
The first things that I noticed was a trembling in my hands in workout, and I found that if I got out of the pool and drank a lot of Gatorade, that helped correct it. That went on for weeks. I noticed through those weeks that I had an increasing thirst. One time finding myself at the grocery store buying 6 gallons of beverage, and that was it. And it wasn't much longer after that my vision started going blurry, and I eventually collapsed and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
A diagnosis of type 1 diabetes would be hard for any young man to handle, but for a world-class athlete in the prime of his career, it was devastating.
And at this point, there's a white noise in my head, and it feels like I've been punched in the stomach and the wind has been knocked out of me.
Your swimming career was over.
My swimming career was over. Those words.
But accepting defeat is not something Gary Hall Jr. knows how to do. Through his father, now a physician, Gary connected with Dr. Ann Peters, a diabetes specialist who was willing to help Gary swim in totally uncharted waters, train for the Olympics while trying to keep his blood sugar in a normal range through grueling 8-hour practice sessions.
I did not set out to say, I'm going to be the best in the world. I'm going to reclaim that gold medal. It was just, let's get through 1 practice. Let's get through 2 practices. Let's get through 3 practices, and never with certainty that it could be done until it was actually accomplished.
And accomplish he did. Gary won 4 more medals at the Sydney Games, including a gold in the 50-meter freestyle. Then 4 years later in Athens, Gary defended his gold in the 50 meters and won a bronze in the 4x100 freestyle relay, an extraordinary athletic and medical feat.
The unknown is scary, and I didn't know if it could be done. That was the least scary thing. I wasn't afraid to fail. I was afraid if my health failed. That was what was scary.
Since his retirement from swimming, Gary has taken on what he calls an even more important challenge, becoming a role model for successful blood sugar control, a diabetes patient advocate, inspiring young type 1 patients, and perhaps most important, lobbying for research so that others won't have to live with the same fear he does every day.
I have 2 kids now, 8 and 10, and I have good friends that have died from a low blood sugar episode. It's possible. And it's beyond my control. And that's why it's not okay to say, oh, we've got insulin. Look, you can win the Olympics, no big deal. That's not the message here. The message is we need research, we need better therapies, and ultimately we need a cure.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the winner
Gary
of
Hall
10
Jr.
Olympic
has
medals,
had a story.
Hall of Fame swimmer and diabetes advocate, Gary Hall Jr.
Thank you, Max. As I look out, gosh, if I'm a role model or a hero to others, my heroes are here today, sitting in this room or backstage, about to come on and talk about the research that they're doing in type 1 diabetes. I look out and I see a room full of brain cells, and it has me seriously questioning what exactly they meant when they added me as +1 on the speaker list. There's a lot of people with a stack of letters after their name, denoting accomplishment and intelligence, and the letters after my name stand for junior. My father, Gary Hall Sr., was a 3-time Olympian. He is the only swimmer to ever carry the flag for the United States of America in the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games. And he held 11 world records. He was World Swimmer of the Year twice. And growing up, I wanted to be a swimmer for 2 reasons. And one was I wanted to be like my father. The second reason was I wanted to beat my father. I inherited my mother's competitive spirit, and so set about to do just that. If I had one brain cell, it was dedicated to the sport of swimming for many, many years. And I slowly climbed the ranks of the sport. No matter how successful my father was, he couldn't give me success in this sport. That was something that I had to earn for myself. And in 1996, I competed in the 1996 Olympics. And I placed second in the 50-meter freestyle and the 100-meter freestyle. And I won 2 gold medals as part of relay teams. And I was very proud of that accomplishment. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted the medal that eluded my father, the one accomplishment in his stellar career that he wasn't able to achieve. And so I rededicated myself and set out to train for the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. And it was a year and a half before those games that I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I had been experiencing those symptoms that I mentioned in the video, and it was my father who drove me to the diagnosis, and we sat together as I was told that day by 2 doctors that it was the end of my swimming career. And I will never forget the exhale after hearing that news. And it felt like there was more than breath leaving my body. And I hung my head, and I couldn't hear anything else that the doctor said. It was just filled with a static, a white noise. And I will never forget that experience. There is no word in the human language that begins to describe the gamut of emotions. And it was such a terrible experience that I wanted to make that diagnosis a little bit less scary for others, for kids and their families. And at that point in my life, all I really knew how to do was swim. But I felt that if I could somehow defy diabetes in some small way and not let diabetes stop me, that I could make that diagnosis a little bit less scary for kids. And I wanted that more than I wanted a gold medal. And this became my motivation, my drive that propelled me. In 2000, I won the individual event. I won the 50-meter freestyle. And to prove that it wasn't a fluke, I stuck around for 4 more years and defended the title as the world's fastest swimmer. This is an accomplishment that very few people in any sport have achieved without diabetes. And, when you see pictures on the screen of me flexing and defiantly and the bravado and being brave, that's great. And it sends a very positive message to young people or adults about how diabetes can be managed properly. But what you don't see are pictures of me, nearly unconscious, underneath the bleachers after the 4x100 medley relay. I have no recollection of receiving the Olympic gold medal in that event. My blood sugar, when they found me, was 23. And I was at the doorstep of death 20 minutes after having been the best swimmer in the world. This is the reality of diabetes management, that while there are moments of triumph or control even, it is a deadly and devastating disease. Devastating doesn't come close to describing it. I also mentioned that I have friends that have died from this disease. Rebecca Medren Colares served on the board of my foundation. She celebrated her 41st birthday at the beach with her family. She had a 10-year-old daughter, and she died that night in her sleep from a low blood sugar episode. I am 41 years old. My daughter is 10 years old, and it could be me tomorrow or the next day, no matter how well I'm taking care of my diabetes today. Insulin is not a cure. It's a patch. It's a Band-Aid. When you swim fast at the Olympics, you have, and use that accomplishment in sport to raise money for research, you get privileged tours of research facilities. And through these tours, I met many people in lab coats that would remark that it was so rare for the researchers to connect with the patient, to meet the people that they have dedicated their lives to helping. And what's so remarkable is that here at the Vatican, in the spirit of collaboration, in this forum, that the patient voice is being heard. This is tremendous, and something that's being accomplished here and through the organization that I'm proudly aligned with, T1D Exchange. You'll hear more about how patients are connecting with researchers from my colleagues Dana Ball and Henry Anhalt a little bit later. My wife will attest, I'm not an emotional man. I didn't cry at the Olympic Games when I realized a lifelong dream. I've never cried during a speech. When I read an article in the newspaper about a breakthrough in diabetes research, I cry openly. And I can't help myself. Because something happens that hope is more powerful than insulin. It's cellular therapies that provide hope for me. And as I said, my heroes are here, all of you. And I'm proud to represent the patient voice here in this forum. And on behalf of all people living with type 1 diabetes, I'm here to thank you. Thank you for your dedication, for your support, and for the hope that you've provided me and all people living with type 1 diabetes. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.